Barbara Talks with Josh Molina, and this is a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to be here with Dale Francisco, former Santa Barbara City Council member and a real player and smart mind when it comes to a lot of things. And today we're going to talk about politics and the election and check in with you on your views and your thoughts and your punditry and analysis on all this really cool stuff we have just right up into the election. So Dale, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, Josh, and the pleasure is mine. Thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And hey, let's talk about we got a couple of big races going on locally. We have school board stuff that I want to ask you about. You are as we've talked about and last time we talked, you sort of broke the mold. You were somebody who got elected onto the Santa Barbara City Council by being a really good campaigner, really good candidate, and just somebody who was tapped into the community and connected on issues. And you won, and you did 2 terms and had a really successful time there. And you kind of ushered in a wave of other conservative candidates to serve for a little while there on the city council. So your perspective is really valid and important. Let's talk about what we're looking at. We have Brad Allen challenging Salud Carbajal for the 24th congressional district. Let's start there. How do you see that contest turning out? What does Salud have any vulnerabilities here at all, or is this just another election he's going to easily win?
Salud doesn't have any huge vulnerabilities from my point of view. He's in a district with, I believe, a 10-point Democratic registration advantage.
Yeah,
that's usually not. People usually don't contest at 10 points or above. So unless Salud had committed some egregious error or there was some terrible scandal that even impressed people in Santa Barbara, his chances of losing are pretty small. Yeah. And at the same time, you have in Brad Allen, I'm sure he's a great guy. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon, pediatric cardiothoracic surgeon. So wonderful, that's great. But he doesn't live in the district. He lives in LA. He ran first the one and only time that I ran in a congressional race back in 2014. That was the last year when we still had partisan primaries. So all the Republicans were running and against each other, and the Democrats, well, it was just lowest caps, as I recall. And I believe there were 5 Republican candidates, among whom Brad came in 4th, which, it was not bad. It was something. But I think the same problem that dogged him then dogs him now. Doesn't live in the district, no political experience, and people who go into politics thinking, oh, I guess I'll run for Congress. Politics is a business. And if you have no experience, the chances of your winning the first time you run are pretty small. Or
yeah,
second in this case.
Well said. I didn't know you didn't live in the district. It seems as though that should be a prerequisite. If you want to represent an area, it feels like you should live in that area, so have some experience there. He's not fundraising really well. In fact, last time I checked, it was under $30,000 that he had raised for a congressional race, which is laughable if you want to be taken as a serious candidate. There's a Goleta City Council race where 2 council members have raised almost double that. Actually have doubled that.
Yeah.
Why does Brad Allen run, or why does a candidate run if they're not going to try to compete legitimately in a serious way?
I think I don't know. I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I suspect what happened was our brain trust at our local Santa Barbara County Republican Party dragged him in at the last minute, pleaded with him to run, and so he accepted. But we have a central committee that doesn't have much experience politically, to say the least. So they're not great strategists. And I'm not saying that the Democratic Central Committee here is that they're great strategists either. But on the Dem side, you don't have, the Central Committee doesn't run it. it's mostly the party up in Sacramento and the public employee unions up in Sacramento. They're the ones who are making the financial decisions and doing the bulk of the fundraising. So you have on the Democratic side in this county, you have professionals in Sacramento running the show. On the Republican side, you have amateurs here in Santa Barbara County running the show, and the difference shows up immediately.
Yeah, I know there's some backstory with Michelle Westlander Quaid being sort of the anointed one to run in this contest, and then the power structure may or may not have gotten Brad Allen in at the last minute, and it sort of split sort of factions. But I do recall Michelle Westlander Quaid being a candidate there was some buzz around, and then all of a sudden it kind of went away, and I was puzzled by that. I mean,
well, I don't know about her ever having been anointed, but I do know that she was and could be sometime a great candidate. She would be a threat to Salud even in a 10-point district if the year was bad enough for Democrats. So I don't know what happened there. Again, I just put it down to sheer political amateur hour on the Republican Party's side. Now, Michelle is an independent. She's not a Republican, but there's nothing preventing our local Republican Party from endorsing an independent. That's okay, according to the Santa Barbara County Republican Central Committee charter. So that's they could have done that, and in my view, they should have done it.
Yeah. So, what's this thinking? I know Brad Allen has done some interviews on conservative media, cable. He did something on Fox News. He did something else on one of those shows. What is the thinking of how that calculus is beneficial to you in a district, or is it just a matter of people believing their own sort of ego and, wow, look at me, I'm on a national stage for 3.5 minutes, so I'm important? I don't never understood those people who run and try to appeal outwardly instead of inwardly.
I don't understand it either. And I think if you're going to win a local race, you have to run local. Yeah. That's really all there is to it. You have to focus on the issues that are important to the people that are going to, you hope, elect you. Salud's great at that. I think of Salud as, for the Democratic Party today, Salud is a moderate. Mm-hmm. And he is acutely attuned to the concerns, at least of his Democratic Party constituents, at least, and maybe beyond that. He is someone who at least tries to appeal to everybody in his district, and he focuses on the traditional bread and butter, getting federal funding for X, Y, and Z in their district that most Congress people run. That's what they do. They brag about how much federal money they've run. And Salud's very good at that. He does a good job. Yes. So if you're going to beat Salud, you have to be better locally than Salud, and that's a tough hill to climb.
Well, I was looking at the campaign fundraising, and Andy Caldwell, he did really well. I mean, he looks like the best candidate in the world compared to Brad Allen in terms of fundraising, and in terms of how many votes he got. I mean,
right.
There's a big drop off this year. Then this is not to say anything about Brad Allen personally. Obviously, he does great work as a pediatric surgeon, obviously, but just speaking politically, there's no comparison between the Andy Caldwell campaign and this campaign at all.
Well, and think about it. So Andy has a talk show that he's on the radio every day. He has CoLab. He's been involved in this community politically for decades. So people know him. They may like him or they may not, but lots of people know him, and the people who agree with him are willing to support him with money, with work, you name it.
Yeah. So shifting gears, we have Greg Hart, who's 2nd District Santa Barbara County Supervisor, professional politician, has been holding office for 20 years, and now he's running for assembly, and he's facing Mike Stoker, who's also been around a long time and has held political office. What's your take on this this campaign? Is this a landslide for Greg? Does Stoker have a shot?
This is another race that most professional politicians would not take on because Greg has, I believe, a 21-point Democratic registration advantage.
Wow.
Again, how do you overcome something like that? Greg would have to do something incredibly foolish. Again, he would have to do something absolutely disastrous to alienate voters, and Greg's not going to do that. That's not going to happen. He is, I would say of both Greg and Mike, they represent respectively the moderate center of each of their parties. And I heard Jerry laughing about the idea of Stoker being moderate, but no, I mean, Stoker has been a straight down the line Chamber of Commerce Republican from the day he got into politics, probably from the day he graduated college. So you have two candidates who exactly mirror the more or less moderate center views of their respective parties. Neither of them, and this is, I'm not trying to be personally offensive here. Neither of them is some exciting, charismatic candidate. They're nice guys who have middle of the road views. And in a case where you've got two nice guys representing middle of the road views, and one of them has a 21-point party registration advantage, who do you think is going to win?
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I would be delighted to see Mike Stoker win that race. We probably overlap on 80% of the policy views. I'm just looking at this from I think a realistic point of view of what do you need to do to win a race? What do you need to do to choose a race that you can win? And this one just doesn't look like it.
Yeah, it looks as though it's insurmountable, both for someone to beat Salud and someone to beat Greg Hart. Greg Hart is not just a Democrat. He is also somebody who is really well liked by the John Davieses of the world, conservatives and moderates. And he's also over there really liked by Darcel Elliott and the liberal Democratic Party. And so that's quite a range of people who respect him. Yeah. And if you run, you have to be credibly compelling and dramatic, and you can't be mean. You can't come across as mean or petty. You've got to figure out a way to appeal, to be a crossover.
Especially you can't be mean with Greg Hart because he has that winning smile.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Have you looked at Stoker's campaign? Is he running a good campaign, about as good as somebody could run? Is there anything you would advise him that he could have done differently?
I don't know what you do differently with a 21-point disadvantage. I mean, the only thing that I've seen of Mike's campaign is his TV ads. He's been running in heavy rotation, the one about Greg supporting higher taxes, which is true, and that will bother some people. And the other one is his wife's ad on behalf of him, which she seems like a nice lady. I'm not sure what the strategy was there, but those aren't going to turn an election.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I would love to write a book one day. I think I may have mentioned this to you or somebody else, maybe Jerry, but just inside the mind of the candidate that runs when they know they can't win. Like, why do you do it? And it's not a matter of qualifications. It's not a judgment of anyone. It's just what you're saying, which is you don't want to, go into a fight where you're outnumbered. You just know, the underdog story is compelling, but there are sometimes in politics where you can't land a lucky shot. Like it's just impossible, so.
Yeah. I think the Mike, I'm not sure. I imagine he was probably involved in politics when he was still in college, and he's been involved in politics his entire adult life. He is absolutely loyal to the Republican Party. He's a party man all the way down the line. And he may feel that just going in there for the fight, per se, is important. And, he probably wants to keep his name out there. He may not be done. He may not be elected to office, but he could certainly be appointed to office if there were another Republican administration in D.C. That's certainly possible. So I don't think it hurts him. I look at things personally. I look at things a little differently. I couldn't go ask people for money to support a campaign I didn't think that I at least had some chance of winning. But
Yeah.
there's different ways to look at it.
Yeah, the relevancy is enough for some. Just the fact that you're in the mix and in the conversation is meaningful to some candidates, and actually ability to win is secondary. And so I think we see that with a lot of the Republicans challenging in these contests where they're so outnumbered in terms of party registration. I want to talk to you about the school board races, and we are seeing more competitive races here than we are in terms of these big assembly and congressional contests. And I want to start with Christy Lozano, who is very it's an interesting tactic she's taking, because when she ran for superintendent, she was everywhere. She raised a lot of money. She was on Fox News. She did her YouTube videos, and she had a very strong presence in this contest. Of course, it was a countywide contest. And I will always say her highs were very high and her lows were very low. You either loved her or hated her, depending on how much you were believing what you were reading, and what you were taking from her appearances in the media. And so people had these very polarizing views. And then here you are in this school board race, and she's, I don't want to say invisible, but that bombastic personality we saw is now not very dim, right? I think she's walking, she's knocking on doors, but she's running a very low level campaign. And I'm just wondering, do you think this strategy is going to work with her name recognition? Again, she's taking on a Democratic candidate who's sort of she's going all out in terms of her effort to try to appeal to Democrats in the district. It's almost like she's running a city council campaign or something. But what's your take on Christy and her efforts here?
I like Christy, and I think she would be good in the job. I think that, to me, I don't know if it's so much strategy or just reality. I mean, remember, she just came off, as you point out, a very energetic and very tough campaign at the county level, and then immediately jumped into this race. Political campaigns are exhausting. And it may simply be that she's doing about as good as she can after what she just completed weeks before. So I don't have any inside insight into that campaign. I agree, she's nowhere near as visible this time. But I think, again, I think she'd be great for the job. Obviously, there's a lot about the issue nationwide, not just here, about parents' rights. And that essentially is what conservative candidates for school boards are running on anyway. We had, during the COVID shutdowns, a lot of parents for the very first time saw what their children were actually being taught in school. And a lot of them were unhappy with what they saw. That led to, arguably, Glenn Youngkin winning in Virginia over Terry McAuliffe. Terry McAuliffe saying, well, I don't think parents should be in charge of their kids' education. That will go down as one of the most brilliantly stupid statements in the history of American politics. So the parents' rights issue, I think, is it works everywhere, but it works better where the electorate is a little more balanced. So you have a lot of parents even in our Santa Barbara and Molina school districts who are upset with some of the things that their children are being taught. Do we have enough to elect Christie? I don't know. But this issue is not going away. And there have been articles, and there was an article several weeks ago in the Indy about Hope School District and the fact that they have these books that I would argue are pornographic. I don't see how anyone could look at them and not see them. They have these pornographic books in the library. That's not good. They shouldn't be there. It's a school library. So those are things for parents to be upset about. Now, most of the parents who are upset in the first place never realized that these things were even going on in the school until very recently. And many of them have never been politically involved in their lives. So you're not going to get a lot of professional campaigning and professional candidates right out the door. I think this is an issue that's not going to go away, and I think it'll develop over time.
Yeah, and just to be clear, not that I'm defending anyone, but that book is a high school library, right? I think it was in the library at Santa Barbara High.
In high schools either.
they're still minors, but I think there's also the presumption by some that these books are available at the elementary school library, and as far as I know, they're not. They're in the high school library, which of course 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, it's still impressionable minds, of course. But just to clarify that point, I talked to Christy. I had an interview with her for my first story I did. And I have to say that I was struck by the difference between how she came across in the one-on-one interview with me than how she even came across in her own YouTube video, and certainly how she's been written about, in the media. That I found her to be very caring about the issues. And I think a lot of times voters can turn on a candidate if they believe they're just saying things to get elected. And I think Christy believes what she says. I think that she's genuinely concerned, and she's not looking for a path to victory, but that she actually believes that there's a lack of transparency, and that she wants parents to be able to know what the curriculum is. And that's not to say whether to agree or not with her, but I think that there's something good about a candidate who is so authentic in where they stand. And these are not, this is her being a parent with a value system, and we can disagree or agree. But at the end of the day, all parents feel very strongly about their children, and they feel very strong. Well, they should anyway. And they feel very strongly about what their children are learning at school. So I was impressed by her ability to be sort of vulnerable and human, and not come across as sort of the conservative, crazy monster that a lot of people think she is, in terms of how she's been portrayed. And certainly that Fox News video.
Not come across as a typical politician who's just looking for the next rung on the career ladder. That's not Christy Lozano.
Yeah.
I mean, as you say, Josh, she is extraordinarily sincere, and she's extraordinarily passionate about education and about her students. She's exactly the kind of person you want in that role of a teacher or of a leader of a school. So, yeah, she's been painted in really dark colors in some of the local media. It's just not true.
So maybe her staying low key is maybe a strategy. She's just going to, talk to voters at the door and do that sort of thing. And as a practical matter, if you had one conservative on the Goleta school board, it's probably good. It creates at least a little debate. If you're a full blown Democrat, fine, but there's nothing wrong with having a conservative who you can constantly be forced to listen to and be able to defend your points. I don't. Nothing is good when it's sort of just 100%, homogenous when we're talking about political decision making. So,
absolutely, and I think, well, that mirrors what happened when I was first elected to city council. When I was first elected, everybody on that council was a liberal Democrat, and they didn't really discuss things very much because they agreed on everything before they discussed them. So my presence there turned that around, and we started to have debates, and that's a good thing. I mean, if democracy is about anything, that's what it's about. It's about hearing different points of view so you can come together and come to the best policy.
Yeah, and I mean, we wouldn't have had those years of you and Doss Williams going at it. Um,
Those epic battles.
I love how those local news reporters can, create stories out of personality conflicts. Um, so Emily's going against two candidates, which are really interesting in their own way. Emily Zacharias is sort of kind of a rising star among the Democratic Party. She's a special education teacher, and it's really interesting to watch her evolve because when she started out, I think she was feeling her way in terms of how is she going to portray herself. And today, by now, I mean, she's all over social media. She's doing TikTok style videos. She's posing with an array of Democratic candidates and elected officials in her social media. She's walking, doing the work. I mean, it reminds me of a city council campaign where she's fully entrenched and she's helping others. Others are helping her. She's raised $14,000 or something, which is pretty good for a school board race. And so she's basically, they're concerned that Christie's name is enough to get her elected. So they're running an intense battle. Have you watched Emily Zacharias's campaign at all? And do you have any thoughts here on how well she's going to do? Is that a no? No, not watching her.
No.
Okay.
Josh, I must confess, though, I've spent all my professional life working on the internet. I don't watch it very much.
Okay.
I don't look at social media.
Oh, yeah.
That's just reality.
Yeah. Well, Emily's very formidable, and I would definitely call her the front runner, just because, right now, as we record this, there's party activists walking for her, and she's walking for herself, and they make calls during the week, and there's so much of that in-kind support, and she's a very likable candidate. She's very positive, and I've interviewed a ton of candidates from all perspectives, and I never feel like she's talking down to me or, like narcissistic or egotistic, which, as we know, there's plenty of candidates who do that.
There are a few out there, yes.
So I think that's probably going to help her at the door when she's talking to people. There's this other guy in the race, Bert Haley, and he is kind of your consummate Goleta guy. He's coached everything. He's conservative. He's a Republican, but he's just kind of like a small business owner, Goleta moderate, right? He's at least that's how he comes across. He knows a bunch of people. He has his wife is a principal in the district, and he just has a lot of contacts and associates. He's not raising a dime. I don't even know if he has a website. He's got a business website. He's very, very minimal, but he thinks he's going to win because he thinks that he knows people in the district from his years of volunteer work and contracts and people he's done jobs for. And so, do you have any sense of Bert Haley? He is a Republican. I don't think he's been politically active at all. He just has the R by his name.
I don't think that he has been active politically. I haven't heard of it before, but that doesn't mean anything. Right. I'm in Santa Barbara, and you know how isolated we are here.
Yes. So he's probably going to get more votes than people give him credit for because Goleta connections in the community matter. If people know you at the grocery store, right, and
I mean, that's how Roger Aceve's good, right?
Yeah,
he's been around forever. He knows everybody.
Right. So, what's your pick? Is Christie going to win, or is Emily going to win, Dale?
I don't want to say anything about that race. I haven't studied it.
But you would be just fine if Christie Lozano was elected.
I would love it.
Yeah.
I think she would bring a voice, and nothing against the other candidates, but I think she would bring a voice to the school board that isn't there and should be there.
Yeah. So sticking on Goleta, and then we'll go to Santa Barbara here in a second. Carolina Bate. Do you know Caroline, Dale? What's your take on her?
I've seen her speak. I don't know her.
What do you think of her as a candidate?
Oh, Josh, I'm just not an expert on some of these races because I just don't pay that much attention.
Well, Caroline is a very unique candidate because I first interacted with her. She would come to Santa Barbara City Hall pre-COVID, 2017, I guess, 18, and she'd wear her Trump, I support Donald Trump button. You've probably seen her with it. and she would go up there and she'd speak for, I think it was 2 minutes at the time, perfectly. She'd start, she'd end, and she'd be done. Very polite. She would show up, and at first, the people in the room, they would groan and they would kind of hiss at her. And then over time, they sort of accepted her. That at the end of the day, she had her views, but she was very polite and kind and cordial, and she was never,
And articulate.
yeah, and she was never yelling at you. And she just sort of, this is how I feel. And so she ran for Goleta School Board. Now she's running for it again. Now it's a district election. She's a very hard campaigner. Um, she is raising money and taking on incumbent Richard Mayer, who's been there for 40 years. He's been on the Goleta School Board, and he's not raising a dime. He just thinks he's going to win. So them parties endorsing him. And I quite honestly think they're underestimating Caroline, because Caroline works really hard. And yes, it's easy to marginalize her as, oh, she's anti-sex education. She is anti-abortion. She is, very anti-Planned Parenthood. She's all those things that enrage progressive liberal Democrats. She is all of those, and at a 10, right? But I also think she's works hard, So I don't. Do you think a candidate like that? I know you don't know Caroline too well, but in these small little races, do you think that a good campaigner can knock off an incumbent who's not campaigning at all?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's essentially how I got on city council.
Right.
One of the incumbents really wasn't campaigning. He didn't show up to all the forums. Didn't have a website. Wasn't out knocking on doors, as far as anybody knows.
Is that Barnwell? Not. I can say his name. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and I like Brian. I don't really like Brian, but for whatever reason, I think he felt like he would just get elected because he was a Democratic incumbent, and that usually does happen on city council. So I can't really blame somebody for thinking that. But Brian wasn't putting out an all-out effort.
Yeah.
And I believe that any candidate who's serious about winning an election has to put it out an all-out effort. And so the gentleman who spoke up, who's been on there for 40 years, one of the questions I would ask, after you've been on a board like that for 40 years, what more are you going to contribute?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the Goleta School Board. I'm talking about pretty much anything.
Right. Yeah, and also in Goleta, Ethan Bertrand, he's going to get a seat. He had no opponent at all, and so he's a young guy. He's very smart, and I like him. No opponent, he's automatically elected. So I think that's conservatives definitely dropping the ball here in terms of not, or maybe they just thought, hey, we can't win in that district, or I think it's maybe IV or something. I'm not sure.
A lot of it is just coming up with a candidate who's willing to do the work.
Right.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah. And then so over in Santa Barbara, we got Gabe Escobedo, who's sort of the other version of Emily Zacharias, rising star in the political Democratic Party, and he's on the planning commission too, so he does have some ties, and he's running for office. And then there's this guy named Dan LaBerge, who is a parent. He's got a nonprofit called Mother's Helpers, where they give supplies, cribs, and furniture to moms in need. It's hard to imagine a more honorable, noble nonprofit than to help moms who need that sort of care for their children. And his kids go to Adelante, which is dual language immersion school, and he kind of knows a lot of people. So that's an intriguing race as well. Can an everyday dad in Santa Barbara beat the political machine, Dale?
I don't know, Josh. Maybe you should give it a try.
I've been told I'm not likable enough there.
Who told you that? I don't know. I think, Gabe obviously has the support of the machine. Yeah. That's very, very tough to overcome. But yeah, I mean, this other gentleman sounds like he's a good guy, and I'm happy he's running. I'm happy at least that the voters have a choice. It wasn't that long ago that very often school board races didn't have opponents.
Right.
That was not uncommon. That's changing.
Yeah, well, there was that race where there were three of them just got elected without opponents not too long ago before district elections. And then there's Rose Munoz and Phoebe Mansur, who that's really close, at least in terms of fundraising. And I think people know Phoebe, and she has a little bit of a base. I don't know if you've had any interaction with her or not, but Rose.
But I know Phoebe, and she's been involved with the community for a long time. In a lot of different ways. So, and her print shop in Molina, she has a lot of relationships with customers there.
With who?
She has relationships with customers.
Oh, customers.
Printing business in
Yeah.
Molina.
Your volume dropped just a little there. I don't know if you.
We have some microphone problems here.
That's way better.
That should be better.
Yeah, and Phoebe Mansur is also handling the printing of a lot of the conservative candidates, I've noticed, and going through and looking at those campaign filing statements. And so I think she's going to do better than people might think. If there are any upsets on Tuesday, it's largely going to be, I think, from some of these people writing off these conservative candidates in these school board races as being too irrelevant or too extreme to the right, because the one thing they all agree on is this issue of sex ed and teen talk, and what kind of materials are whether they're inappropriate to be teaching children in the district. That is a really strong issue that all these conservatives who are running are talking about all the time. And so Mansur is one of those. And Rose Munoz, who's the incumbent, I think she got a little bit of a late start. And again, all these people are very nice. They're very kind. None of this talk is like them personally. Rose Munoz is a super nice person. But I think that she's going to have a little bit of a challenge here, maybe. And certainly in terms of fundraising, Phoebe's raised more money than she has. So, that's...
Phoebe's a hard worker, and she's articulate. She comes across well in public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have that sort of thing going on, and it's just really, really interesting to see how that goes. I mean, it might be just a Dem party sort of just all of them are going to win, and it is what it is until the conservatives figure out a way to actually get a field game and a ground game, because that's the biggest difference. There are no Republicans right now, as we record this on a Sunday, that I know of that are knocking on doors for any candidates. It just doesn't happen. Instead, you got the Dems going to Dem households, reminding them to vote. And if they just turn out their vote, they win all the time.
Yeah.
Bouncing back to Goleta, do you know Roger Aceves? I mean, he's a longtime incumbent.
A little bit, yeah.
And he's very likely going to get knocked off by Luz Reyes Martin, who is Democratic Party endorsed candidate. She's on the Goleta School Board. She's a job, communications job for Planned Parenthood. Raised about $60,000 for her campaign. Do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, Roger's been around a long time. He is a Democrat, but he's not a favored Democrat. He's not left enough, I guess, for them.
Right.
But
yeah.
What do you think?
As you said, Roger's been around forever. He knows tons of people. He is a Democrat, but he's a moderate Democrat, middle of the road Democrat. He's not out there on the left. So who knows? Who knows what his chances will be in Goleta nowadays? But Roger's done a lot of good for Goleta for many years.
Yeah. Roger, he just seems like the prototype for what you should have on a Goleta City Council. He's diverse. He's Mexican American. He's a former cop. He's a detective, former hostage negotiator. He's what you see is what you get, and he cares about his community.
Yeah.
He's sort of criticized heavily because he took oil money when he ran for supervisor against Janet Wolf.
Mhm.
And so there are
Yeah.
people who will never forgive him for that.
Right.
But on the Goleta
They'll
Council,
drive their cars though.
yes. Um, and one of the things I'm sort of just I'm bothered by, but I'm just sort of intrigued by is here we have district elections, and the whole point is to increase Latino representation, and you're going to bounce one Latino for another in this contest. And I guess some would say, well, that's the point, Josh. We got two strong Latino candidates running. That's a good thing, right? But at the expense, one versus the expense of the other. I mean, when we're talking about equity, I don't think we're talking like counting. We're supposed to be talking about the best qualified candidates having opportunities to run, and we're trading them here. And they're running in a district that's like Mountain View, which is like not even, it's not majority minority, that district, So I don't know. District elections, your thoughts on those? Are we going to be better off in these micro local races because of them?
No, we're
No.
not. I was against district elections in Santa Barbara from the beginning, and the downside of this supposition that the only reason that you don't have certain kinds of candidates in certain places on a council or a school board or whatever, the idea that that's because of racism is crazy from my point of view. If you have a good candidate, I think in Santa Barbara, it doesn't matter what their race, ethnicity, religion, or whatever it is. If they're a strong candidate and people believe in what they're saying, they can win. So all the things that I had read, because I did some research on district elections when this first came up at the city level, the places where that really begins to make sense is large cities. If you have the breakoff point tends to be around 250,000 population. At that level, you get to a place where you have enough neighborhoods with significantly different needs at the very local level, perhaps than the city as a whole, and then district elections make sense or can make sense.
Yeah.
But in a place as small as Santa Barbara or Goleta School District, no. I mean, I think at-large elections make much more sense, and you get differences. Let's say, for instance, Hispanic voter turnout in the city of Santa Barbara in the districts 1 and 3 that are designed to be Hispanic districts. It's never as good. It's never as high as the turnout in other districts, and that's just reality. But that's the votes aren't being suppressed. It's just there aren't as many people interested in voting or legally able to vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with everything you said there. In Goleta, it's almost not fair either. Like so I have a kid in the Goleta school district. Okay, so I don't get to vote on anything because Ethan Bertrand is going to be my Goleta district member, which is fine. I like Ethan. He's a good guy. I think he's going to do a good job, but I don't get to vote on, who the other board members are going to be. I mean, it's such a small district, right? It seems a little bit like you can almost get just too small with this whole district elections thing. And so the other part is what I've seen definitely on the city council since they became district elections is deference to your district. So, if the district one council member wants this project, then everyone else is like, well, they're good, and I won't really get in their way because I don't want them in my way when something comes up that I want. And I've definitely noticed that in Santa Barbara, and I don't think it's good. I think you should, when you get elected, I think I like the idea of you're representing your area, your community, but I do not like the idea of these trade-offs that go. I don't like these trade-offs, and it just does not seem better, And
No, I think you're right, and I think that's why Santa Barbara historically, before the state law that pretty much forced us to do district elections, And the same state law is forcing Goleta School District to do district elections. Before that happened, Santa Barbara had oscillated back and forth over the years between at-large and district elections. So I think this go around of districts is the third time in city history that we've had district elections. Mm-hmm. And you're right. I mean, that kind of horse trading that goes on between the districts, that's the obvious downside.
Yes. And, in an at-large election, Rogers getting reelected and Luce is getting elected, and they're both on there, and they're both strong candidates in their own right. And we would have 2 Latinos on the Goleta City Council, and we're only going to have one after election night, whomever it is. James Carriaco is running against Sam Ramirez, but Sam Ramirez is not going to win. He's just outnumbered in a whole bunch of different ways there. James has raised $62,000 in a Goleta City Council campaign.
And running TV ads.
Yeah, and he's running TV ads, and he's like, well, think of all the money you're paying for that to go countywide. How many people are actually going to see that sort of thing? So, hey, Dale, before we wrap up a little bit, I want to ask you, as I know you're a brilliant mind on all these national
now, Josh, Don't start a question that way.
This is part of my shtick. Come on, what I do. Okay. No, but I am serious. You're really smart on this stuff. Elon Musk has just purchased Twitter, and everyone's losing their mind because they're worried. Everyone's like tweeting, I'm going to cancel Twitter. I'm off Twitter. But then they're tweeting on Twitter. They're going to do this. I think he wants to charge people $8 for keeping a blue check mark and having advanced features. And you, Dale, have always been really good at just offering a real reasoned, moderate, sensible take on things. And you're not very emotional, which I think is good in politics. What do you think of Elon Musk taking over Twitter?
Well, I think obviously there was stringent viewpoint discrimination on Twitter before the Musk takeover. We'll see what happens now. Mm-hmm. Musk has said that he doesn't want to censor anybody. Mm-hmm. And if that's true, I think that's great. So Elon Musk also obviously is a very experienced businessman. And I would assume that the things he's doing, that he's changing at Twitter, are necessary if he wants the business to be profitable going forward. It's not clear that it was before. Mm-hmm. So, and he just paid, what was it, $44 billion for it? So I think he wants it to start making some money.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that my take on it is we don't need Twitter. Like, we were just fine. I mean, I was watching a movie the other day. It was like filmed it came out in 2004. This was before the iPhone. There's no iPhone in the movie at all. And the storylines were great. The movie was great. It's just like people did exist without social media before. And if you don't like Twitter, get off Twitter and spend more time with your family. You're interacting with, real people. So rational. With real people in the real world, or jump to TikTok, or Instagram, like figure it out. That's sort of my take. If I lose Twitter, I'll probably complain for a day or two, but my life would be fairly normal after that.
Gosh, wouldn't you say that? I mean, I don't look at Twitter that often, but wouldn't you say that it was the marketplace for short, pithy political statements?
Oh.
I mean, it's different from other social media in that respect, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it definitely was, and it's really good for sports. I like sports. It's a great way to sort of stay up to date on scores and people's perspectives. But the problem with social media is it allows people to observe creativity and then comment on other people's creativity. And it's really low bar creativity for some people. I mean, obviously there's great people on Twitter, but when you get in this sort of habit of just kind of reacting to what other people are doing and then commenting, you're wasting time when you could actually be creating something of your own, whether it's in your own
agree.
life or big or not.
Yep.
And I think we get, there's a weird thing of there's validation. Somebody likes your stuff, where you say something that's funny, you feel good about yourself. That's not a real feeling, though, because if you met half these people, three-fourths of them in real life, they probably wouldn't like you, just because they like your tweet doesn't mean anything. So I think that's an interesting thing. He did do some massive layoffs. I would imagine you're cool with that if you think it's more efficient, or, I mean, what do you think?
Josh, I can't remember how many layoffs I've been through in the tech world. It happens all the time. It's a fact of life.
No.
And when you get new management in, it's especially a fact of life. That's just reality.
No.
It wouldn't matter if it was Twitter or anything else that he had bought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever I see that stuff, I'm like, I worked at the news press. Like, I mean, do people not look at history every time you have a new owner, and not saying anything about any owners, but that's what they do. What they buy it for, so they could leave it the same. Of course, they're going to fire people.
Yeah.
You wish they wouldn't. You wish they would figure out a way to keep everybody, because those are people's lives and families. But I have never seen any organization where they didn't come in and clean house.
Right.
Like, why should you be the one they keep when people who make far less money than the people employed at Twitter have been fired when a new management or new owner comes in? It's hard to have much sympathy for these people, on Twitter anyway.
Yeah. I think I read that the average salary for software engineers at Twitter was $208,000 a year. I was thinking about applying, but I'll wait till after the layoffs are over.
He might like you, he might keep you around. Yeah, so yeah, we'll see where that goes. Elon Musk seems like I don't know, people love him, people hate him. He seems like kind of a weird dude, but that's, if you want to be on, it's like, I don't like the people who complain, oh, I'm banned from this, I'm banned from, it's like, it's not a First Amendment right to be able to publish on somebody else's platform, right? That's not a First Amendment right. It's your First Amendment right to publish yourself, right? You can go out there and you can say what you want and you can write what you want, but to say you have to publish me, no, that's the business owner's right, and you can disagree, but it is what it is, So we'll see where that goes. Maybe I'm just grumbling because I only have 1,000 and so Twitter followers.
Well, let's see what happens under the new regime. Maybe that number might skyrocket.
We'll see, but I don't have a blue check mark just because I tried one time to get verified. It's like 10 steps. I'm like, I don't have time in my day. This doesn't mean enough to me to. You have to like upload your driver's license. I'm like, I'm not doing that. Like, I have work to do. So, all right, Dale. Is anything else going on in the news you wanted to address, or your legions of supporters and followers, or anything?
It'll be interesting to see what happens on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a show. I'm doing my radio show. Actually, I'm doing my radio show with Michelle Westlander Quaid on Wednesday morning.
Okay.
And
You going to talk about Brad Allen?
Pardon?
You talk about Brad Allen's failed candidacy?
Oh, like I said, nothing against Brad. That just doesn't look like a very likely win. But I think that there will be. I'm assuming there are going to be a lot of wins at the national level. We'll talk a little bit about that, but we'll be mostly focused on local things. Yeah.
Okay, and you might even give a plug out to a recent podcast you did. Who knows?
Yeah, I might.
All right. Well, Dale Francisco, I appreciate your time. Former Santa Barbara City Council member and still very knowledgeable and active in the community. Thanks for lending me and the audience your thoughts and your views and your punditry. And we'll do this again down the road. Have a great day.
Thanks, Josh. You too.
Take care.